Sue, you know, I often think of the comment when Mozart once was asked what his favorite note was, he responded by saying the rests, because without the rests, all these notes would make no sense whatsoever. And I think that on a day like today, and certainly in the days that followed September the 11th, we as a country are able to come together and just stop for a moment and to think about where we have come from, where we are, and where we're going. And while we may be a little on the pessimistic side as to whether or not Democrats and Republicans who have been fighting over these many months are somehow going to come together, hope springs eternal. And maybe just for a moment we're able to reflect on the life of President Reagan in such a way that people at least will stop and think through it a little bit better.
And we'll punctuate that note with the rest of our own and be back with more coverage in just a moment.
I really believe that President Reagan brought tremendous respect and credibility to the presidency, and I think one of the defining events that produced this was the PATCO confrontation. You know, the background of it was that in the first 6 months of Reagan's time in office, there had been negotiations with the PATCO union representing the flight controllers around the nation. And they had been asking for a significant increase in pay. They had been asking for a reduction in their work week from 5 days to 4 days, and also significant improvements in their pensions. And the cost of this to the federal government was going to be enormous, to say nothing of the fact that the ripple impact throughout all federal employees would have been a huge number. So they reached a confrontation in August of 1981 and set a strike deadline, despite the fact that there is a federal law that you're not allowed to strike the government, and it's part of the contract that employees have. They set a strike deadline and they went on strike. As soon as they struck, the president held a press conference, I remember it, and announced that they had 48 hours to come back to work or they wouldn't be fired. Naturally, presidents were used to, everyone was used to presidents making speeches, but no one expected this to happen, or few expected this to happen. And 2 days later, they continued on strike, and the president terminated all of the then striking employees, and also committed that they said they couldn't come back to work. The next day, the supervisors, those employees that did come back to work, as well as the military, manned all these flight controller positions. And it was actually quite surprising that the system worked as well as it did. For sure, there were a number of people hurt by the strong action of the president. First of all, flight controllers. Many of them lost their jobs because they had seen the system the way it had worked before. No one had ever been fired, so they assumed that it wouldn't change. And they were not able to get their jobs back. Secondly, passengers, where the delays were very, very significant. Airlines took huge losses. We were, at the time, starting a small airline, New York Air. We had a whole bunch of new aircraft coming that was supposed to go online in August of 1981, and we couldn't get the planes in the air, and we suffered significant losses. But the other side of it is the credibility that it gave to managers trying to enforce, to try to bring discipline to cost structures and so forth, was very, very, very significant. And you can be assured that the Soviet leaders sitting in the Kremlin were watching the air traffic controllers' situation very closely, just to test the mettle of the president.
At Morgan Stanley, we think it's important for you to ask questions of us. And it's just as important that we ask questions about you, your goals, and your tolerance for risk. Because the best way to be an informed investor is to work with an informed financial advisor. To learn more about what we're doing to help individual investors succeed, visit morganstanley.com.
They're hot, they're powerful, and they can tow over 6,000 pounds. Who do you love? Trailblazer, and the 7-passenger Trailblazer EXT. Trailblazer, an American revolution. Trailblazer is available with the safety and security of OnStar.
Performance is what happens when teamwork, experience, and strategy come face to face with opportunity. Introducing Dreyfus Premier Balanced Opportunity Fund, recently awarded a 5-star overall rating by Morningstar. With performance driven by a strategic mix of stocks and bonds, it seeks to produce competitive results in any market environment. Ask your advisor for a prospectus with complete fund information, including charges, expenses, investment objectives, and risks. Always review each factor carefully before investing. Remember, past performance is no guarantee of future results. Go to Dreyfus.com for the fund's recent month-end performance. Dreyfus. Time-tested strategies for investing, no matter what the times.
As the motorcade makes its way ever closer to Andrews Air Force Base, where the Reagan family, Mrs. Reagan and her children, and the extended family members will then take the president back to his final resting place at Simi Valley, the Reagan National Library there, where, incidentally, over the past week, when the president's body was in repose at the library, 100,000 people filed by to pay their respects to this gentleman who, of course, started his political career in California, and something that President Bush actually made reference to just a short while ago at the ceremonies at the National Cathedral.
As soon as Ronald Reagan became California's governor, observers saw a star in the west, tanned, well-tailored, in command, and on his way. In the 1960s, his friend Bill Buckley wrote, "Reagan is indisputably a part of America, and he may become a part of American history." Ronald Reagan's movement arrived in 1980. He came out ahead of some very good men, including one from Plains and one from Houston. What followed was one of the decisive decades of the century, as the convictions that shaped the president began to shape the times.
And Jerry Seib, the star in the West that President Bush described ultimately became a star in the East as well, having served 2 terms as President of the United States, and in many ways remade the office. The presidency, though, in character and tone, has changed in the years since. How would you characterize the changes we have seen in the White House since Ronald Reagan resided there?
Well, I think you first have to think about the way he tried to change the office. I mean, he tried to bring sort of an aura of grandeur, perhaps, or certainly respect to the office, and tried to keep it a little bit above the daily fray. I think that